Beyond.
Beyond.
What's up, everyone? My name is Jonathon Dornbush, and I am here with executive editor of news and my boss, so hopefully this goes well, Andrew Goldfarb.
Hello.
How are you doing, Andrew?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing pretty well, because we're going to be talking about Spider-Man.
Yes.
Yes, this is a conversation we could not fit into the original episode of Beyond this week, so we are now talking about Spider-Man in this sort of Beyond conversation, a Beyond-versation, if you will, if I can use a lazy
I will do that. I will say Beyond conversation.
Yes. No, I'm super excited because you played several hours of this game that we're all dying to see more of.
We got to play kind of like the first 2 or 3 hours of the story, but then they let us just, from that point, stay in the open world and swing around. So we saw like, I feel like I got a really good idea of where you start with that game, like everything that you do first.
Yeah, so I want to jump into some of the story stuff in a bit, but I did want to talk about gameplay. We've played the game before at E3, and we've seen, how good the swinging feels. We have previews of that up on IGN. But I want to know what else you saw about the gameplay, specifically some of the suits that you may have seen. Like, what did they show you of those?
Yeah, we did. So it was a lot of the stuff that, because we both previewed the game, and your E3 preview, I think, covers off on sort of the mechanics of it all. And so we still saw that stuff. Yes, it is an open world game for anyone who somehow doesn't know that. It's, you are swinging around New York. It still feels like a Spider-Man game. It still has all the momentum that I think Insomniac is really known for, especially after Sunset Overdrive. So like, you swing around, climb buildings, do all of that. But what we got to do a little bit more was see how kind of the systems work. So as you're swinging through the world, when you're not on a mission, there's some things that you can do to level up, because you do have an experience system. You do have like a level for Peter for your character. So you can do stuff like take out like street level crimes. So people, robbing a jewelry store or stealing a car or whatever. Take out groups of guys that way, and those earn you a thing called crime tokens. You can find these bases that are almost like mini horde mode chapters, where there's like 5 or 6 waves of enemies, and you take them out, and you earn a base token, or even multiple base tokens for taking out those. There's collectibles in the world. We swung around and found, basically Peter is dumb, and when he was in high school and first starting out, he would leave school, climb a building, web a backpack to the wall, and then go swing around and fight crime, and then forget where he put those backpacks. So via a mechanism, he realizes that there was, you get to a point in the story where he realizes, oh, I used to keep like tracking chips in those. I can go find them. And as you're swinging around, you find backpacks. They are marked on the map.
And they give you tokens also.
They do. They give you more tokens. This game loves, it's like Chuck E. Cheese.
Yeah.
Loves tokens. You get a backpack token for those. But then also when you find a backpack, it's really cute. You get a little Easter egg you can view in the pause menu that's like one of the ones I found had a restaurant menu from his first date with Mary Jane. One of the ones I found on Avengers Tower actually was a vial of sand containing the remains of Sandman. So they're like cute little things from Spider-Man's past.
It seems like a great way to put in Easter eggs for everything that the game itself won't be able to address, because obviously this won't cover all of Spider-Man's history, but like you just said also, and they've hinted at before, the Avengers Tower is there. Like, this is established. Established world.
He's been Spider-Man for 8 years. He's like in his 20s, so he started in high school. He's been doing this for quite a while. So yeah, like a lot of the, the game isn't holding your hand as far as the origin. Like, it knows that who Peter Parker is. It knows that who Aunt May is. About Uncle Ben dying. Like, it really gets that stuff out of the way immediately. The very, very, very first thing you see in the entire game when it starts is a tracking shot through Peter's apartment. Yeah. And it's looking at, you saw it at Comic-Con,
I saw it at
right?
Comic-Con, yeah.
So it shows like some old photos and mementos and things like that, and you see it starts out with a photo of young Peter with Uncle Ben and Aunt May, and then a slightly older Peter with just May, and an even older Peter in college with Mary Jane and who I'm guessing is Harry Osborn. And there's like these really cute little nods to it, kind of in 30 seconds gives you all the exposition you need for like up to that point.
Yeah, instead of seeing the movie that we've seen 3 times, we don't need that again.
Yeah.
So you were talking a little bit about the tokens. What are they used for beyond someone who like has OCD like me in an open world game and wants to collect everything? Why else do I want those tokens?
So those are basically the currency for how you craft suits. And so there is a story reason that I don't want to get into that you are able to kind of create new suits.
Superman comes and helps you.
Yes, exactly. Bruce Wayne and Superman come in.
Exactly.
Yeah, like we said, established. No, but there is an actual story reason. But essentially, every time you level up, so in our demo we got to level 7. And in the pause menu, you could see a new. You start with the one that you see in all the ads and stuff, and then from there, every time you hit a new level, there's a new suit available in the pause menu, and it tells you what you would need to craft it. And so those are generally combinations of tokens. So like to get the Scarlet Spider suit, you might need like 2 backpack tokens and 1 crime token or whatever it is, and then they get more and more complicated. And so yeah, those tokens are your currency for that. They also, I think, are tied to XP.
Okay.
So I think if you take out a base, that's a much bigger XP bonus than just like finding a backpack.
Sure. And there is a skill tree involved with all of this as well, right?
Yes, yeah, and so you do, you also, your like I said, your character has a level, so just like any game with RPG elements or even like God of War, you do have a skill tree divided into 3 parts, and it's Web Slinger, which is all of like your movement and stuff, Defender, which is like fighting skills, things like that, and then Innovator, which are, you have these gadgets you can access in the pause menu that, again, are crafted via a story mechanism, but they basically are like one you get is like explosive webbing or things like that are just like cute little nods to the kind of inventor side of Peter that, he's not just swinging around. Like he's sort of like what you would see in Homecoming or in some of the more recent Spider-Man iterations. Like he is creating little pieces of tech that can kind of help him fight crime.
Yeah, they've talked before about how this is very much a Spider-Man that is a scientist. Like he has these roots in technology and stuff. So it's really cool to see that. And it seems like from what you played and what you've told me that each suit also plays into that too. Like they all have their special abilities and things.
Yeah, it's really cool because every suit, along with the suit, you unlock a suit ability, but that ability doesn't have to be used with that suit.
Yeah.
So if I unlock the Scarlet Spider outfit, one of the things with it is you can project decoys, holographic decoys for enemies to attack. And then if I want, I can go back to the main suit, but I can have the ability be, the holographic decoys. And it's really funny because like some of them, we couldn't get to them yet, but we could see them in the pause menu. There's one that's like a bulletproof suit. And so it's like really funny to me that like, theoretically, that skill would be able to transfer to one of the other costumes. I don't know if there are restrictions or anything, but it didn't seem like it from the demo.
Yeah, and you were telling me, I just wanted to bring up the decoys, because you were talking about how funny they are.
Yeah, and that's the thing. The game definitely has like that Peter Parker sense of humor, and like one of the things with the decoys is like Peter Parker is still like he's doing like voices for the decoys, even though it's obviously him.
Yeah.
There's one really funny thing in it that if you know about Scarlet Spider in the comics and Ben Reilly and like the clone arc, like one of the things you see all of these holographic decoys out, but like Peter's weirdly narrating and he's like, oh, look at me, I'm not a clone, definitely no clones. Seriously, no clones. It's like really, there are funny little bits with those. And I feel like even in the suits themselves, like they're finding some obscure stuff. Like when I went to the event, I was with Joshua Riel, our comics editor, and he pointed out that one of the costumes is Spider-Man's Secret War outfit, which is like black. But that one actually was never worn by Spider-Man. It was only on the cover of that issue.
Oh, wow.
So it's like a pretty obscure pull, which is really cool. But yeah, I think the game is really smart with giving you kind of a reason to get there, because even if you don't care about the aesthetic of that costume, the ability for it might be something really helpful depending on your playstyle. And I think it also incentivizes you, because the currency are those tokens, you can't just mainline the story if you want the suits. You know? Like you are gonna have to eventually take out some bases, find some backpacks. And the way that works, it's very similar to like Assassin's Creed or a Ubisoft game. In Assassin's Creed, you would climb to the highest point in the city, get a good vantage point, and it would kind of show you that area and some of the points of interest. This is that, police towers. Early on, someone you're working with in the police kind of tells you, we have these police towers we were given, but all of them, the network just went down. Can you bring them back online? And so Peter, being kind of an inventor, figures out that as he goes around the city bringing them back online, he can hack them and then keep that information for himself. So like when you're near a tower, it'll tell you the crimes that are nearby because he's tapped into like the police scanner, and it'll show you where backpacks are because they have RFID sensors that he installed at the radio towers. He like sets to pick up on those signals and stuff like that. So it kind of makes sense within the context of the story.
Yeah, so with all of those other options for tokens to collect, like with bases or with the backpacks, and we saw some research tokens also.
Yeah, research tokens, landmark tokens for taking photos of stuff.
Is there, obviously, you need to fill the open world with interesting things to do. You played a few hours of it, not the full extent of the game. Is there any concern about whether or not those activities will become sort of rote and boring, or do you think there's a variety enough to keep you going if you intersperse it throughout the story?
That is my concern a little bit. I imagine they'll mix them up, and I think like you unlock combat abilities as you level up, and I mean if you're choosing that part of the skill tree. So I think combat inherently will become more interesting. But early on it did feel like, okay, like I'm at level 7, I'm not unlocking anything else. I've been playing this game for 2 hours, and then I spent another, an hour and a half or so swinging around. Like it did start to feel a little bit repetitive to take out bases. I would imagine, though, that they'll add new twists to them. I think they're smarter than to just let them sit as they are.
Totally.
There's also the fun thing with the backpacks that, like, they're tracked on the map, but they're hidden in really funny, smart places sometimes. So you get to the building, but then it's almost like a puzzle of figuring out where in that building they are.
Okay.
And then landmark tokens are for taking photos of New York City things, which as a former New Yorker, I think you'll feel the same way.
Yeah.
That was really cool and like had this almost like romantic sense of place for me of like, I did want to go seek out the Empire State Building and, you know, the Flatiron Building and whatever else. And then I also think that it does a really good job of incentivizing research. I don't want to say who Peter works for or specifically what he does.
Batman.
But yeah, Batman. But that stuff does tie into his day job a little bit.
Okay.
And so you're earning research tokens by doing sort of projects for your boss, which I think is really smart.
So yeah, I do really want to touch on that because we've talked a little bit about it. It feels like this gameplay experience that you've had with it opened up a lot more of who Peter is in this game and like what his deal is in this particular Spider-Man story.
Yeah, and I think that's what stands out to me is that you're totally right that, you know, we know the story. We know who Spider-Man is. We've been here a while. They don't need to spend a lot of time telling you where he came from. They spend a lot more time telling you who he is. And so I find that really interesting that you kind of come in and media res to what his life is. And so like, you know, he has this, you know, the kind of relationship you would expect with Aunt May. And his Mary Jane relationship is very complicated. They are broken up. I believe it's been about 6 months when he starts since they broke up, and they haven't really interacted, but the story kind of brings them together in part of one of the missions that you play. And so they're on good terms, but confusing terms, which is like the most early 20s thing they could possibly have done, I think. And Peter is this guy who, you know, he has figured out a lot of the mistakes that we see him make in Spider-Man movies. So in the 8 years we haven't seen, it does feel like Peter, you know, has been humbled a little bit. He's not cocky. He takes his time. He listens to people. He knows the value of friendship and good advice. He clearly doesn't trust some people and trust others more. And you get to see a little bit of that kind of in his interactions. Like, I feel like Peter feels so well defined in this. And to me, that almost makes him the strongest part of the content that we played. Because as fun as it is to be Spider-Man swing around, like, I don't think it would work if Peter didn't work as well. And if you didn't care as much, like, there's so many funny things, like when it shows that tracking shot of his room, Peter Parker's always hard up for money. That's like such a big part of the character. And so it is really funny. There's like a jar, it's like laptop funds and it has like $8 in it. And like as you're swinging around, he gets voicemails from his landlord that like he's past due on rent. And there are like all these really funny just trademarks of the character that work really, really well, in addition to just the humor of like his one-liners and things like that.
Yeah, it feels like they're really trying to flesh out that this game is not just Spider-Man in the suit and you're swinging around having a good time. Like the parts of Peter's life that happen outside the suit matter just as much. Yeah. And they talked a little bit about that. I know you talked to the creative director of the game, Brian Intihar, and they've sort of said that you know, the best stories are Spider-Man and Peter Parker's lives clashing together. And it feels like that's what they're aiming for with this one. Yeah,
I think that they seem to be expressing that's like almost the core tenet of what they're aiming for this entire game. I think they've talked about that a little bit, that like you can't have one without the other, obviously. There's no way to make I mean, there's not no way, but I don't think it would be especially interesting to only play a Peter Parker game or only play a Spider-Man game. And I think they do a really good job, at least in those opening hours, of finding that balance. And I think knowing Peter cares about stuff or knowing Peter cares about people, you care about them more, like, as the player.
Yeah, though I would love a Peter Parker photography sim where you just go around New York taking photos.
Man, get those landmark tokens.
Great, I will, trust me.
I will note that because Peter doesn't work at the Daily Bugle anymore, he does have a different job, you do miss out on that part of it, I think, a little bit maybe, but...
Jay Jonah's still in it, though.
Jay Jonah has a radio show that you hear bits and pieces of where he's basically telling the city how awful Spider-Man is, and you know, people call in and they're like, wait, like, didn't Spider-Man save the city from, you know, dudes made of sand and a bunch of robots? And Jay Jonah's like, yeah, but those robots and that man of sand weren't in the city before Spider-Man, so cause and effect, and he just blames him for everything. It's also, you know, because Peter's more established, the game opens, I keep describing it as, it feels like a boss fight for a game that you didn't play. And so the game opens with, for 8 years, Peter's been Spider-Man, and Wilson Fisk, the Kingpin, has been the big bad of New York, and he's been kind of the arch nemesis of Peter up till this point. And so when the game begins, it's you literally wake up in your bed to a police scanner saying there's police activity at Fisk Tower, and Peter's like, this is it, it's all happening, and then you go, you have like a very quick kind of tutorial mission where they block traffic in Times Square. And so you kind of very, very briefly learn some skills and take out some guys to figure out combat.
Yeah.
And then you go to Fisk Tower, and then you have to climb to the top. It's like a very long, lengthy, multi-stage thing. You get up, you see Fisk, it's a multi-stage boss fight. Like it really does feel like the ending to a game, even though it's 10 minutes into this.
Yeah.
And then you put Fisk away, you get him, you take him out, and you're putting him in the police car, and he looks at you and he's like, I was keeping order. Like the criminals around you were in order because of me, and in a month you're gonna regret this.
Yeah.
And I think that's sort of the beginning of this power vacuum that allows, Mr. Negative and the rest of the Sinister Six to come in and really be a force that the city probably hasn't dealt with in a while, is kind of the impression I got.
Yeah. And I love it like that setup gives you the idea that Spider-Man has a relationship to these villains. Like, it's not just, oh, I have to fight the random boss in the middle of the city. And it seems like the story hints that they've been moving toward with the Sinister Six, and the tease at the end of the E3 trailer where he's like, so he clearly knows these villains. It seems like they are establishing both Peter's connections, but also Spider-Man's connections.
Yeah, exactly. And like there's that really interesting thing that Martin Lee, who becomes Mr. Negative, is Aunt May's boss.
Yeah.
And there's like they've been pretty open about that. Like I don't feel like that's like a spoiler or anything.
Yeah.
And that doesn't even happen in the part we played.
Yeah.
Like the part we played doesn't have any of the stuff we've seen from E3 trailers and stuff. But it is really interesting that they set up that core first. So it's not this weird thing where like, you fight Mr. Negative and then find out who he is later. It's the opposite. It comes from Peter first, and I think that's really, really cool.
Yeah, and so going back to Peter's personal life, him outside the suit, can you tell me a little bit more about like Mary Jane's role in the game? Because they have talked about how she's playable, and you got to see a little bit of that, right?
Yeah, we did play a mission as Mary Jane, and she obviously doesn't have a costume, doesn't swing through the city. She does more stealth stuff. And so what we did, it was a mission, you go to a museum to check out a disturbance, and as Spider-Man, you go in, and you see there are a bunch of guys there, and you're like, what the hell happened here? And you find a camera, and it's Mary Jane's, because Mary Jane in this game is an investigative reporter. It's a very like Lois Lane-esque kind of thing, kind of role. But she's the one kind of looking for scoops and getting herself into trouble, not Peter.
Just like you look for scoops.
Just like me, newsboys. So then from that point it flashes back, and you see kind of how Mary Jane got there, and you play as her. And so you see how she got in the museum, what she was doing. And her gameplay is very stealth-based. I don't even think there was any kind of attack, or at least we didn't get to do any of it. She did, there's a puzzle. You have to piece together a statue to find a hidden compartment. And you're doing more investigative stuff, so you're looking around the room for clues and things like that. And it worked really well. You eventually switch back to Spider-Man, and he clears out the villains in the room so she can escape, after they've met up. I'm guessing that they seem to be setting up that you would switch between the two of them. When we interviewed Brian Intar, he kind of hinted that might be the case, but wouldn't explicitly say it.
Sure.
The other big thing, Miles was not in this part that we played at. I think you super quickly see him just kind of as an aside in a cutscene, but like you don't interact with him or meet him or anything. So I am still wondering if Miles comes into play as a playable character in some way. I don't know. Like we still don't know what that'll get to. But the two big things that they emphasized were mentorship and partnership. And so the mentor, Peter definitely has mentorship in the form of the person he works for that you find out pretty quick early on. But I think he also is setting up to become a mentor. And I think by virtue of having done this for almost a decade, like he has a lot to offer a young superhero, if perhaps Miles Morales does come in, which is going to be the big thing. And then partnership. He is able to ask for help from people. I think, like I was saying before, like he's not this cocky guy who thinks he can take on the world himself. Like he knows his limits. He knows that he needs a support system. And I think Mary Jane and Aunt May are definitely a major part of that.
Yeah, it feels like on all sides of it, a really smart approach to making Spider-Man work in a video game, like in modern day game design, where he can't really be alone. Like in Spider-Man 2, you can have him just kind of swinging around by himself and have the focus just on Spider-Man, but there has to be a lot more going on. So obviously there's a ton more in the game that we don't know about, like you were saying, both on a story and gameplay front, but how are you feeling coming off of all this?
Really good. I think honestly, like I love Spider-Man 2. That to me is kind of the Spider-Man game. And I've played games since then. I actually played The Amazing Spider-Man, like the first tie-in game for the movie. Did have, like, you could swing through New York, and I had it like on my iPad and I swung through, but like it's been a while since I found a core Spider-Man game that hooked me, and like this feels pitch perfect. It really does. Like swinging feels great. I think Peter is so funny and just perfectly on brand for the character. And it's funny because there are other games where, like Telltale's Guardians of the Galaxy, didn't quite click with me because it wasn't the MCU version.
Sure.
Because I've gotten used to Chris Pratt being Star-Lord.
Yeah.
And, you know, I've gotten used to that cast, and the Telltale game being different just didn't click with me in the same way. Whereas Spider-Man, it didn't bother me for a second that this like isn't Tom Holland, because they're going for something so dramatically different. Like this actually works as a really sort of great foil for what the movies are doing right now. And in that way, I don't know, it just made me so excited to get deeper into it and find out more about this story, because I really love Peter. Like I really love that character, and Spider-Man means so much to me that I just can't wait to see more.
Yeah, well, Andrew, thank you so much for joining me.
Well, Jonathan,
it's wonderful to be on a conversation.
Thank you for having me.
It's a shame we won't see each other again.
Yeah, it's true.
No, if you want to learn more about Spider-Man, you can read and watch Andrew's full preview on IGN.com. It is wonderful. I've read it.
Oh,
and it's good.
Wow, thank you.
Good job.
Thank you.
And for so much more on Spider-Man ahead of its launch on PS4 on September 7th, you're already in the right place, IGN. Beyond.